Well, hello everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, publisher of Walls and Ceilings, Roofing Contractor and Building Enclosure. Rick Damato and I are honored to visit today with Trent Cotney, CEO of Cotney Construction Law. You know, Trent, it really is amazing how much you do for the industry. And as everybody knows, Trent truly is one of the legal experts in the roofing industry, but represents all contractors in the construction trades, as well as we all know, an incredible advocate for the industry and so gracious with his time. So Trent, as always, thank you so much for your time. And I'd love to turn it over to Rick Damato to kick us off and ask some questions about what's going on.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jill and Trent. Thank you as always for your great input and advice. And I want to say thanks to all of our listeners and our readers out there. Just to get us started, give us your top 3 picks since we spoke last week. What are the challenges and concerns roofing contractors are calling your Cotney Construction Law offices about?
So first, Rick, Jill, always great to see you guys. Really enjoy being able to talk to you and the audience. And, you know, this week has been interesting. You know, the way that COVID-19 has been is you get these periods of just a lot of news. And I think we're starting to get into that ramp up period again. Of the number one thing that is the most interesting bit of news that we've been getting calls about is that the state of Virginia today, through its state Osha plan, and just to back up for those of you that don't know, Osha is the government entity that deals with safety, okay? And there's roughly 24 states that are federal, and then there are 26 states which have their own state plans based off the federal guidelines. So Virginia is one of those state plans. They came out today and they said, guess what we're gonna do? Okay, we're gonna put some, not just guidelines, we're gonna put some rules in place that businesses have to follow. So some of these rules include things like, hey, if you get, if one of your employees tests positive for COVID, you gotta give notice to your other employees, okay, within 24 hours. Before, that would never occurred. So daily, you know, Rick, Joe, we'd be getting phone calls from, you know, contractors in California and Arizona and Texas and Florida and all the hotspots that are spiking right now, wanting to know how to deal with this. Okay. In addition, these guidelines that were put out in Virginia suggested that, you know, you've got to have social distancing in place in your office. You've got to have sanitizer. You got to have all the things that we know about our guidelines. They've kind of transitioned them into rules. And there's some teeth to it. Okay. There is a retaliation provision in there, meaning that if you've got an employee that is complaining because of safety issues related to COVID, they're entitled to do that. And if you take adverse action against that employee, then you could be liable for a retaliation claim. Okay. And then here's the other thing is you can get fined for not doing that, anywhere from $13,000 to $130,000 plus, depending on the gravity of the situation. So this is the first state that has actually come down with hard and fast guidelines. Okay. And then you look at sort of the converse of that, which is Georgia's governor recently said they're not going to enforce mask provisions. Okay, so you've got a big issue. The second issue, and this kind of ties into the second issue, is the political dynamic and the power struggle between federal, state, and local governments. Okay, and I think that the inconsistency and the lack of a unified approach has led to some of the spiking in certain areas. And, you know, obviously I'm not a politician, you know, but from my perspective, you know, you need some unification here, and you need to approach it, take the politics out of the situation. Okay, you look at what's going on. That causes me some concern because it shouldn't be a political issue, but it is. And there's a lot of power struggles, some very interesting constitutional struggles that you're starting to see among local and state government, among state and federal, and this will continue. Then I would say the third thing, which has been sort of an ongoing issue, is mental health and dealing with that from the perspective of contractors and trades. And we've had a lot of phone calls recently, you know, not just about employees, but from the employers themselves, from management. You know, and I've got great friends in the relationship. I've told you guys plenty of times, you know, the industry, they are my friends, they are my family. And I'll get calls from them and they'll just say, Trent, man, I'm tired of this. I can't deal with this anymore. You know, and these are guys that are a lot tougher than I am, right? I mean, these and gals, and they're, you know, they have been in the industry for a very long time. And when I talk to them, I can tell that the mental stress is getting to them. And one of the things that I try to talk to them is put my legal hat back on, as I say, look, it's important that the men and women that work for you, that they have access to mental health therapy and things like that that's useful within a workplace. So you want to work closely with your HR staff. You want to have employee assistance programs, EAP programs. You want to try to create an environment that you're safe, you're still social distancing, but you are providing for a good workplace that helps relieve stress. And there's a variety of different ways to do that. There are contractors that engage in, that have yoga time, or there are contractors that allow pets to come in. And I've seen all different kinds of things done. There's no right or wrong thing. The one message that I want to send to listeners out there is don't look over the mental health issues that this event is creating. It doesn't matter how tough of a person you are. Okay. I remember I had one conversation in particular. This was a second generation women-owned business. I talked to the owner of the business. She is tough as nails and one of the smartest contractors I know out there. And never, ever once heard any issue from her ever other than legal related issues. And she confided to me that she said, look, this is hard. This is very difficult, and I've had the same conversation with dozens and dozens and dozens of contractors. So don't overlook the mental issues, which are underneath all the other stuff that's visible. People still don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, I did a panel discussion this morning, Trent, with some wall and ceiling contractors, and that's exactly one of the things that came up was mental health and how that's been an issue for them. But back to what you were saying about communication and how you have to notify. OSHA's saying now you need to notify your employees. How do they do that? What's the best way? Because I know that you and I have talked before that, of course, you can't, with the HIPAA laws, you can't mention somebody's name, but what's the most effective way as an attorney that you would recommend people do that?
Sure. So keep in mind, this is Virginia state only right now. But normally what we do is, let's say this wasn't Virginia, let's say this was just anywhere. And they said, hey, I know that of this 4-person crew, 1 person tested positive for COVID. Okay. What you need to do with the Cdc and Osha guidelines are is you need to notify anybody that was in proximity, 10 feet or less, or exposed to them for 10 minutes, 15 minutes or longer. I try to be really conservative. Guidelines have kind of moved all over the place. Latest is 15 as of June. I usually say 10 just to play it safe. If it's within that proximity and duration time frame, then what you want to do is you want to notify those employees. Okay, and the means and methods of notification, it can be on the phone, it can be via email. That doesn't matter. What matters is the message. And the message is always this: someone that has worked very closely to you has COVID-19 and has been exposed. Now, you and I both know that everybody on that crew is going to know who it is, right? But you don't need to say that, and you don't need to publicize that. So if, let's say you're in the state of Virginia where you're required to give this 24-hour notice, you would send an email out to your employees saying, hey, just to let you know that someone within this office tested positive for COVID-19. Here are the precautions that we're going to take. We're going to continue doing temperature testing. If you have any reason to believe that you're sick or been infected, you need to quarantine. There are quarantine requirements within the Virginia law, okay? 10 days or 2 negative tests within 24 hours of each other. So they've gone, it's very, very in-depth. It just came out, I think either yesterday or this morning, and I was drilling through it trying to get all the details down. But what's really interesting about this, Jill, is this is a sign of things to come, okay? If I guarantee you California, Oregon, Washington, all the state plans are definitely going to come out with something, and you're going to start seeing these mandatory rule requirements. It's not going to be a slap on the wrist anymore. It's going to be, you're going to face some serious fines and potential problems if you don't follow what you need to follow.
This is a little bit, you tell me, is this not a little bit unusual to have rulemaking at that level? Most OSHA rules, and they don't really make a lot of rules. They make very little really direct policy that says your hard hat has to be this thick. They don't get down in the weeds that much. It's kind of unusual, isn't it?
It is and it isn't, and let me explain why. So I've participated in the federal rulemaking process with OSHA, okay? In particular, I went up to talk about, some of the programs that they have in place, and I advocated on behalf of construction. There's a very lengthy rulemaking process, okay? Like everything in the government, it takes a long time to get anything done. But there is a process to do it. So the stuff that they have federally right now, the guidelines, technically, if I have my lawyer hat on, I'm saying these aren't enforceable rules. So yes, I will try to monitor them, but you don't have an enforceable rule against me. Okay, and I've had these conversations with OSHA assistant area directors, and they said, Trent, I love your argument. Okay, fantastic argument you just made, but guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to say that you're violating the general duty clause, because as an employer, you have a duty to keep your employees away from recognized hazards, and this is a recognized hazard. I said, okay, well, we'll see how that goes, and we'll take it from there. With regard to your question, Rick, okay, with the state plans, okay, these are state OSHA plans, meaning that they have opted out of the federal framework, and the federal guideline, the Federal Oversight Committee has looked at these state plans and determined that they meet or exceed federal standards. Those state plans operate independently, so they can engage in their own rulemaking process to determine some of this. Now, they can't go less than what federal asks for, but in many situations, great example is Washington, for example. Washington has its own state plan, WSHA, and they are very, very aggressive. They have a rule that basically has strict liability. So if you are a contractor and you have a subcontractor on that job, you are liable for their safety. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay, that's commonly referred to as the multi-employer site doctrine. There are defenses under the federal law for that. Washington's a different beast there. So to answer your question, yeah, they can go through the process. I haven't dived deep enough into the Virginia law to determine what the rulemaking process was and whether or not it was appropriate. All I do know is they have said, this is what's going on, this is what we're going to do, and we are going to enforce it. It came about primarily because of unions. Okay, unions and some politicians were very concerned that there wasn't any federal guidance on this. Unions have been big advocates for both federal OSHA and state plans to enact some kind of protocol that people can follow. And, that along with the fact that I think so many complaints have been issued by employees to VOSH, the Virginia Occupational Safety and Health entity, that they had to go about and do something like this. That was what their justification was.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how many of the other state plans and how quickly they move to adopt this or other rules that are this specific to managing this pandemic. The state, federal, local sort of argument. I'm based in Georgia. We have a Republican conservative governor. Our mayor of the city of Atlanta is now being spoken of as a potential vice president nominee for the Democratic ticket. They don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. Mayor of Savannah, same thing. They're going back and forth to the point that the governor signed legislation that just specifically says municipalities can't make these rules. They can't go above or below the state rules. Interesting dynamics. What do you see? Is that same thing playing out in other locations?
All over the place. I can give you a personal story. City of Tampa mayor is constantly fighting with the Hillsborough County commissioners, and our headquarters. We've got 20,000 square feet here, where we are right at the city line and the county line. So we're technically in the county, and we've got a different set of rules than the city does sometimes, depending on what's happening. And that's what you're seeing everywhere. Jill and Rick, it's become politicized. And it shouldn't be. This shouldn't be a political thing, but we're in an election year, and I think there's a lot of that going on. Now, there's a lot of very interesting legal issues. If I were to put on my legal nerd hat, I would say, hey, we got some constitutional struggles here, because I don't know to what extent you can force someone to wear a mask. I don't know to what extent you can enforce businesses to close. There's a lot of potential constitutional challenges that could come up from this. Sometimes you have seen that. You have seen people filing suit. There is a challenge right now to the no singing in church rule that I think was in California. So you're seeing a lot of this interplay, a lot of stuff happening, regardless of whether or not there's actual capability or authority to do it. People it's a reactive type of politics rather than sort of a proactive. We've kind of switched the paradigm.
Well, speaking of your legal nerd hat, just put your crystal ball in front of you too, and tell me, we know this is going to have an end. At least there's going to be a cure, and there potentially a vaccine, and life will begin to go back to normal at some point in time. 2 years, 3 years from now. How long of a tail from the legal standpoint is all of this activity going to have?
I think I'm not a doctor, I'm just a lawyer, what do I know? But if I'm looking at this, we are in this for a long time, and we dug the trenches a couple of months ago, and we recognized that this isn't a 2020 thing. This is probably this time 2021. We might be in another round of it, a different phase of it. I don't know. And I think ultimately what you're going to see is a lot of the stuff and precautions and the way that people are interacting and engaging in business now is going to become the new norm. I think there's a lot of businesses that are either dying or have died as a result of this and will never come back. But with regard to the legal aspect of it, obviously one of the things that we've talked about in the past is my concern about liability for exposure to COVID. And what's interesting, I was talking to our lobbying group, because we definitely, here in the state of Florida, we definitely want to move forward with some tort reform that limits the ability of third parties to come after small businesses for unintentional exposure to COVID. Other states have already done this. Other states have already started proactively trying to create statutory limits on the ability to go after certain businesses because of COVID exposure. Now, obviously, if I know I have COVID and I go and I cough on you, then I'm going to be liable, right? That's intentional exposure. But we're talking more about unintentional exposure, because the last thing that contractors need, regardless of what trade you're in, is to get out from this nightmare, to survive it, and then have a ton of lawsuits because somebody happened to get COVID that worked on one of your jobs, right? That's the worst case scenario. So, I think that we are going to start feeling the economic impact late fourth quarter, first quarter next year. When these stimulus funds run out, when we start, and there's been talk about some additional money coming, and there will be something, but eventually the free handouts are going to stop. Right. And then I think there's going to be a reckoning, because you just can't artificially inflate an economy that's been hit this hard. I think about here in Florida or Texas or California or any of these states that are spiking again, these restaurants and these other places that have had to open have closed, then opened, and now they got to shut down again. It's devastating, and barely surviving to begin with. Now to close it all down again. If I'm a restaurant owner, I'm like, I need to get into roofing, right? So that's the issue right there, is I think that there will continue to be a lot of legal issues related to COVID for the next 2, 3, 4 years even, and I think we need to all be proactive from a business standpoint to do what we can to try to limit suits, for unintentional exposure. I'm all for making sure that there is a recourse if somebody intentionally exposed. But I don't want to see contractors and trades embroiled in litigation or have their insurance premiums go through the roof because of these types of claims.
Well, speaking of lobbying, the National Roofing Contractors Association has an office in Washington, D.C., and lobbying for the industry is what they do. And they've been almost as busy as Cotney construction law since all this started.
Busier.
And you've been educating us about the Paycheck Protection Program and some other congressional actions related to the pandemic. But there's two caught our attention recently. One is the proposed home improvement and commercial infrastructure tax credit. Mm-hmm. The other is the Skills Renewal Act. Can you just give us your spin on those two?
Sure. And I think there's a lot of legislation that has been proposed that, like the two that you mentioned, which could help stimulate construction. And I'll start with the skills first. One of the biggest things, we've been meeting regularly. When I don't have my lawyer hat on, I've got my lobbying hat on. And we've been meeting regularly with all the state representatives, state senators, And the thing that we hit over and over and over again is vocational training. Anything that will help improve skills training. I can't stress the importance of that enough. And college is great, and having higher level courses for construction in college is good. But I want to focus on the kids that are in school now, right? I had some of that training. I liked it. If I could go back, I'd be a contractor instead of a lawyer. So I think it's that kind of stuff I think is really critical. And I think that we really need to focus on anything that helps assist that. Now, with regard to the home repair, and I want to tie that into some of the infrastructure stuff that I've seen as well. There's been a variety of both state and federal suggestions by both parties, okay, for either the tax credits or infrastructure bills or anything like that, all of which could potentially be great for construction. The one thing that always causes me concern about this is there's really two things. One is that oftentimes in the infrastructure bills, there's only a focus on horizontal, meaning it's a focus on roadway, utility, bridges, and there isn't enough focus on vertical. Rick, vertical is a very hard sell right now. It's a hard sell because, schools are at half capacity at best. What are you going to pay more money to improve schools? That's a tough sell, but there's got to be something from a vertical standpoint that you can promote from an infrastructure side of things to make sure that money just isn't going to trades that do horizontal work, right? I want to see that to go to the roofing contractors, the wall and ceiling contractors. We need that in our bills. And any of the credits, the home repair credits are great. It was real interesting. Rick, you know this, Jill, I think you know it as well. I'm a roofing history nerd, right? So in addition to being a legal nerd, I'm a roofing history nerd. So last night I'm reading a history book on roofing, and it's talking about World War II, and it's talking about a lot of the different acts that affected roofing contractors during that time frame. And one of the incentive plans that came out to help spur some of the economy was something very similar to that home repair act that you mentioned, where you potentially get credits for that. And it was critical because the association at that time, which later became NRCA, was very adamant in making sure that roofing was included as part of that package. So the message to the audience out there is I personally don't care for politicians very much. I mean, I may be in the minority, but I don't like politicians. But now is the time to be in front of your representatives, your state and your federal representatives. Your voice needs to be heard. It will be heard, okay? And you need to understand, doesn't matter how big or small you are, you need to stay out in front of them, because if you don't, then they're going to pass you over. Work through your associations. It's one of the things that I've kind of learned. There's power in groups like that.
Well, the last question for me is, since last week, or just whatever's on your mind, where's the silver lining? Give us some examples of contractors who've had a win recently.
So we've had a lot of contractors, and I love, obviously I get calls day in and day out. A lot of what I do is what I call business therapy. Contractors will call me, and I've got to explain everything from employment related issues to immigration to construction. Well, I got to explain everything, right? But really, when it comes down to it, a lot of the legal issues arise because of business practices. So I like to discuss business, and I like to kind of figure out, what does their operations look like? What does their production look like? And I can tell you, there are certain contractors that have really embraced technology and have really recognized that the door-to-door closer option doesn't exist anymore. You have to embrace virtual. You have to be able to close immediately because your customer is here today, gone today. You've got to be able to really cement that and be able to show the value add. So I've had some really great conversations with contractors that are embracing this time, embracing the technology, and are leapfrogging over the traditional competition because they're stuck in a standby mode. They don't know what to do. They're operating business as usual. The other thing I've mentioned is I think, I love technology too. And I think one of the things that I've talked to is you're going to start seeing some really huge leaps in technology. I had some great communications earlier this week with someone that is engaged in 3D printing. They're like plastic tiles that interconnect, they interlock for, that's primarily used in developing countries right now. But I could see where 3D printing and other technologies like that are going to start skyrocketing, because you got to be more efficient with what you got. You got to be able to use technology in a quicker, faster, better type of environment. And to be honest, if I have to give you a real silver lining, Rick, I think this might be what our industry needed. Okay, and I know I'm trying to give you a silver lining, so bear with me. This is sort of that come to Jesus moment where you got to sit down and you got to say, okay, we are the industry. Life has evolved. How do we get to that next level? This forces those contractors, this industry, to get to that next level. Whether you like it or not, you have to either evolve or die. And I think that it's forcing us to take that leap we probably should have taken 20 or 30 years ago, right? So that's about as good a silver lining as I can give you, Rick. How's that? Is that?
But how can that not be?
Right.
This technology we're using today, it's not new.
Right.
Everybody
Right.
talks about the new technology. Isn't far from new.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trent, as always, thank you very much. You've given us an awful lot to think about. Jill?
Trent, I like your new title. You're business therapist.
Yeah.
Maybe a legal business therapist.
Right.
I might have to start introducing you that way from now on. Anyway, well, if anyone needs to touch base with you, Trent, can you give us a quick shout out how to do that?
Sure. Always hit me up. Email Cotney at cotneycl.com. Feel free to go to our website, cotneycl.com. Look forward to talking to you.
Yes, and if anybody has any questions, if you have any projects or anything else that you're working on that we should know about, please reach out to us at roofingcontractor.com, wconline.com, and click the Contact Us page, and make sure while you're there you sign up for our free digital edition and our e-newsletters, so you can always stay up to date as to when we're doing our next interview with Trent, which we do every week at this point. And we always want to make sure that you got some great nuggets and some great takeaways. So everybody, please stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again, Trent.
Thank you.